welcome to the latest episode of the latest thread. Today we're going to keep it casual and we're just going to have a quilty chat. Looking back, what have the few months been like, what we've been working on, um, just anything goes. So, who wants to get started?
You. I know, like you're already talking.
Fine. Well, I thought I would take all that time and use it wisely. Well, that was my thought process, anyhow. And I was going to make all these quilts, quilt some quilt tops that's been laying around. But I was surprised. I still kept busy with quilting for other people. I thought that would let up once we were, staying home, but it kind of didn't. So still busy with that. And then I am working on a super old UFO, almost done. But it's kind of weird. You think you have all those possibilities, and at the same time, it's seemed harder for me, anyhow, to focus. I did want to learn some software. I upgraded to a Statler late last year, and so I wanted to, really get more proficient with Creative Studio. And once you dive into that and really start learning, I was amazed. As you all know, I'm not very computer literate and tech savvy, but once you really spend some time, Creative Studio is super easy to use, I find. It has a lot of facets to it, but at the same time, it makes sense. And to me, once a program makes sense is, great. And then now to really learn how to use what I'm doing in Creative Studio and applying it to some customer quilts is still a challenge, but so I spent quite a bit of time with that, frankly. So how about y'all?
I've never been busier. But it's not all quilty. Like I still have my client quilts, but I'm also helping my husband to put down landscaping rocks. And we had oh, 8 or 9 pallets of sod delivered. So there's that. You know? And here's me thinking I'm going to do all this great stuff. I am learning a new software, which is it's a different kind of thought process for me because it's not how I think, but I'm getting there. I'm learning it. And that's it. Like I enjoy taking a nap now because I just want to not do anything for just a minute. And that's it. Mm-hmm.
I would have to agree. I in the beginning of this stay-at-home business, I thought, well, I was kind of busy in the beginning. And then I thought, well, once this is done, I'm going to make all of these things. I've made nothing, zero. But I did feel kind of a shift in, so to me, I feel like as much as I don't like being stuck at home, it's been like a forced pause. Like you're thinking about things that generally I just can't because, if you're traveling constantly, you're teaching, it's just nonstop. So I had time to like really kind of refocus a little bit on things that like new classes. When you're out on the road all the time, there's no time. They're in there. They're not coming out because there's no time for that to happen. So I spent a lot of time on that. I'm learning some new software too. And which generally I would not have time to do that. I just, so that's kind of cool. And I don't know. I have been busier though. I think, how did I get all these other things done before? Because I'm not doing any traveling. So I feel like I'm just as busy. It's kind of weird.
I think the first half of the time that, well, at least the first few months was feeling like a bit of a scramble because there were so many shows canceled and teaching engagements canceled and all of these kinds of things. And with quilting being our sole income, it was, okay, how are we gonna move forward from this and make it through? So the first little bit was a bit of a scramble, but then it became, okay, we're all right. Now is the time to focus on some of the things that we had in the back burner going. Like I've seen Karen put out a lot of digitized designs recently. That's on my back burner, but it's like, it's still for far, far back.
That's fun software. The other software is not as fun.
Fun software. Yeah. And so and we host a lot of retreats at home here in person, and big retreats where people come even from the US to visit us for our 5-day retreats. And so we've turned them into online. So it's just changing the way that we're doing things, taking the classes that we had existing and turning them into online classes. And then like Jodi was like, oh, I have these new classes rolling around up here. They haven't even made it to the paper yet, you know, because and part of that is because like people are still quilting. They're still making quilts. There are people picking up their sewing machines after 20 years of not touching them, dusting them off, and oh, I'm going to finish this quilt. So we've had a ton of, well, the existing customers, but then a ton of new customers as well, because so many more people are sewing. I went in to buy a replacement foot pedal for my sewing machine the other day at one of the shops in Calgary. And she said, I couldn't even sell you a sewing machine right now if I wanted to, because they don't have stock. They're just, people are buying them whenever, and 100 deep for servicing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, people are really looking to sewing, which is really awesome, because we need more quilters. More quilters is a good thing, especially the younger ones, right?
Yeah, and you know what you mentioned in regards to, you know, online classes, you know, for me personally, that was a big challenge, you know, to change how you present a class in person, you know, and just trying to learn how to better present it online. So obviously the information is the same that you're presenting, but just, you know, because it feels different, you know, you're sitting in front of a computer screen recording your material, you know, without that feedback, you know, oh, I like that, you know, well, you should change it. You know, there is no one giving you feedback. So you're crossing your fingers, hoping, especially if it's a new class, you know, that, you know, and then just figuring out the setup, your lighting, your audio, all of that. How am I going to show them drawing? You know, to me, you know, if it's something new like that, and to me, you know, you want to do a good job, you know, so you want it to be just right. And that has been a challenge, but a challenge that I think we've all overcome, you know, pretty well. So now we're just fortunate because whatever happens with this pandemic, we still are now able to, you know, offer online classes, you know, whether it's through us personally or through Gammill and their Gammill education, you know, so we learned something valuable for us for the future. So positive things came out of this as well.
Yeah. We've all learned how to be more adaptable. The kids.
And we see each other more now than we ever do in person.
That's true. Well, yeah, I guess so. And that's a good thing.
Mostly.
Right? And that's another good point too, because that contact, you know, that social aspect, you know, that we kind of lost, the personal one, you know, I can't wait for some of that to come back, you know, because it's nice. Even though I don't mind at all being here by myself, you know, do whatever I feel like I need to do, but I do miss that interaction like that.
When the pandemic first started, everybody's like, how'd your life change? And I'm like, I can't go out to dinner. Other than that, my day is exactly the same as it was.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think too that it's probably most if you're a long armer that doesn't have a job outside the home. Yeah, mine's the same. It really hasn't changed other than no traveling. But yeah, I mean, I go out to get groceries. It's the same. I
Day
don't.
to day is exactly the same as.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, anybody else want to add anything?
We can't wait to see everyone again.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
The huggers in the group are very neglected,
The
right?
huggers, yeah, we're really,
And we can't wait to travel again.
I don't like the traveling. I like the getting there, like arriving,
Being there.
being there. But the traveling part, I
Wow.
somebody
You
should
just have to
really
sleep
work on
on the
those
plane,
little
Sharon. Just sleep on the plane.
beam me there. Somebody's got to have that working on their back burner.
I bet your luggage will still get lost.
Okay, so I guess we'll wrap up this segment and we're going to take a break and we'll see you right back.
Today I get to show you Gammill's new professional bobbin winder. This little machine kicks out absolutely perfect bobbins every single time. It's quiet, it's simple to use, and it's built to last forever. I've got to tell you, I've used all kinds of different bobbin winders over the years, and after using this one, I am completely in love with this machine. Obviously, one of the things you need for perfect stitches is a perfect bobbin. And this machine delivers one every single time. It only takes about 30 seconds start to finish, so you can wind several bobbins while staying at the machine, or since it stops by itself, you can walk away and come back when you need that bobbin. And now I'll just pull the finished bobbin off, drag the thread down through the thread cutter, and there we have one perfect bobbin. Check out how evenly this bobbin is wound, and the thread tension on this bobbin is perfectly consistent from the first stitch to the last.
Welcome back, everyone. We are super excited to go on to our next segment, Ideas for Your Quilt. And today, we're featuring Sue Hanson with her beautiful quilt. You can see it hanging in her background. And Sue is going to tell us a little bit about herself, where she's from, her quilt, the story behind it. And go ahead, Sue. It's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, ladies. This is so much fun. My name is Sue Hanson. I have a business called Trackside Quilting, and I am a long arm custom quilter and designer for Hoffman Fabrics and a couple other pattern companies. And I am having a blast. This quilt that I asked these ladies to help me with is from a buttermilk basin pattern called Thimble Blossoms. It actually is done in wool through that company, but because I don't do a lot of wool, we did it in cotton. It was a block of the month through my shop. And so I actually will get to utilize maybe all of the ideas that these four ladies give me, because I'm sure I will be quilting more than one. So I'll get to play with each of their ideas.
And so where are you located?
I am in Laurel, Montana, which is just outside Billings, Montana, which is the largest city in Montana.
Wow, that sounds pretty.
It is beautiful here. And actually it was supposed to snow last night, but it didn't. We got lucky. So it's probably going to be 45 or 50 degrees today.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, now we're gonna see a close-up picture here of your quilt, and I'm just amazed how intricate the pieces are. And also by your fabric choices. Looking at that basket, I mean, you did a great job choosing fabrics to really make those appliques look realistic.
Thank you. The fabric is one of my favorite things in the choosing of the quilts, is picking out the colors and the different fabrics.
And what applique method did you use?
We used a raw edge fusible, and then I zigzagged a small zigzag around the appliques with an invisible thread. And then it, as you can see, it also includes embroidery, and there are embellishments on it. There's buttons, and there's different other beads and embellishments on it as well.
It is intricate. Wow.
I like your decorative stitches. That's nice.
Yeah.
I love my machine, and I got to play with a lot of decorative stitches in this particular quilt.
I thought you did that by hand because I saw some embroidery stuff and I was like, she's really good.
No, the decorative stitches I did on the machine with a metallic gold thread, and then I did embroider a lot of the other things by hand. Yes, but all those leaves are connected by a hand embroidery.
Yeah.
It looks like that would be something that's a work in progress for a long time. Well, if I was doing it anyhow. So.
Well, the nice thing was it was like a block of the month. And so I had to get it done every month to show the other ladies that I was working with the different things you could do with each block. So it kind of forced me to get it done, because I'm not really that timely either.
We're all deadline driven too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think we're ready to go to the drawings that we did, and hopefully we can, give you some ideas. So this first one here is the one I drew up, and I personally love quilts like that because you can play, because each block obviously, is different. And what I like most about doing a quilt like that is adding details within the appliques. And, I didn't draw any of that, but, for instance, on the duck, I would outline the wing, just the wing, and obviously I would ditch around all the appliques. And I would do that first with probably a 100-weight thread, and that way I can do the detailing and stitching in the ditch first without changing my thread color. And that way I can roll the quilt back and forth and then do my fill after, because for the fill I would use probably a heavier thread. And by heavier, I mean probably a 50 weight versus the 100 weight, and would match the background, because even though I want to add dimension or texture to the background, I don't want to take away from the applique. And so I drew a couple of different background fills, and they have to be rather small because you have some itty bitty spaces to get into. And even though I had drawn this dipple on the bottom, it wouldn't be my preferred way for the background fill, because you're dealing with these itty bitty spaces to get into, and then it would look scrunched in some places. Whereas if I choose a couple different designs for the fill and mix up the sizes, it's not as noticeable as I squeeze into those little spaces. But in order to not make it too tedious, I would add larger design elements in the more open spaces, just so, it goes a little bit faster, because there's a lot of fill to be done. And then the sashing, I didn't know how wide it was. It's hard for us to tell, the scale. So if it was necessary to add something, can have a choice of, I thought, the pearls. But the scroll design also is probably what I would go with if the sashing needed quilting. And then in the spools, just pretend like you're quilting thread. And then I just stitched in between, where the spools connect. For the border, you have so many choices. You kind of want to frame it all in. And the reason why I chose the leaves that I, drew in the main section is because looking at your applique, there's a lot of leaf sprigs. I thought it would pull it all together. Of course, you can mix it up and add swirls. And then one of my favorites, I love to stitch feathers. So I wanted to see what that would look like. And then I can bring it into the spools also, fill that space. But in regards to border designs, I often do those last because I want to see how everything pulls together. And then what kind of feel does the quilt give? Is it whimsical? Is it, more traditional? So that's how I would choose my border design.
All
That's all
righty.
I got.
What batting do you think?
Well, number one, I guess the first question we always ask is how's the quilt going to be used? I assume something like that is more of a display piece rather than a usable piece. I'm guessing, is that
Yes, that's what I would consider it, definitely.
so, over quilting is okay. And for that reason, I would probably use two battings with the wool batting on top, just because when you do a dense background fill, where I said, add larger design elements, those would really, come to life as well as in the border. So a 2-layer batting is what I would do.
Okay. That's what I was thinking, but that's awesome.
Only thing though, just because I used to work with a shop that did the block of the months, and I'd get their first one and I'd go overboard, and then they'd hang it up, and now they all wanted that, and I was like, oh no, I don't want to do all that for all of you. So I ended up finally realizing that I could do it nice, but not anything that I wouldn't want to do 10 more times. So that's something to keep in mind, though, I think.
Right.
Most definitely.
3 is my number. When somebody brings me that 4th one, I'm like, I don't have it in me now. I'm done.
Run out of ideas.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
Or they
much
say,
there
I want it
too.
just like so-and-so's, and I'm like, I did 5 already. I don't know which one that was. It's crazy.
Yeah.
This is mine, and I decided to mark a big diamond in the background and then kind of echo that out. I like the look of it because I think it adds some dimension, some depth to it. And also, the more of these kind of things that you add, the less fill you have to do. So I'm all for that. But those, I envision those probably a 1/2 inch wide, but you could change that. I actually might do 1/2 inch and then put 1/4 inch on both sides of it to take up more space, less fill, even less fill. But I would, because I wouldn't want and I would mark that all before I loaded it. So I know, because it would be impossible, I think, to mark that as you go. And then when I load the quilt, I would do the fill around all of the applique, just around the applique. So I know where to take those lines to, and I can sneak around in like little pebbles, whatever. It can be any fill you want, but the pebbles are just nice because you can travel through them good to get to the next line to go back out. And then once I got all of that, because that would essentially stabilize the quilt the whole way through, then I would work my way back through and do the fill. As I come to the applique pieces, then I would do my outline and continue on. But that's personal preference. You might like to do all of your outline first. I tend to like to start at the beginning and end at the end one time, not repetitively. And then, I mean, the sew part, I did kind of frame it in because I think I don't know, to me, it kind of is the main thing. And I added the pebbles around it because that allows me to travel with the lines, the diamond lines. But I wanted to put the rest of it straight lines just to kind of set it apart, I guess, from all the other applique. And because I have repetitive diamonds going out, I would probably pick a couple of different fills and alternate between the two. Just, you know, it can get really tedious when you're doing one thing for an entire quilt. For me, anyway,
And
I
that
think.
keeps your eye moving around the quilt as well. If they were all
Yeah.
the same, it would just be flat. Mhm.
I do
And
get
then-
bored easily.
Yeah. Then in the spools, I just did straight lines. Because I just like straight lines. I don't do the back and forth thing well. And it kind of matches in with the straight of the diamonds in there. And then, so I truly didn't treat it as having a border because I don't know. But you actually, I mean, I guess you kind of could. If you only did the center diamonds, you could fill the rest, the corners, with a, like, I don't know, some sort of feathery thing but my tendency, and you can probably tell, is not to have any specific designs. So I just want it to all be there and be pretty and create texture and depth, but let all the piecing and applique kind of be the main star.
I think those straight lines are really effective in the corners because it mimics or repeats the straight lines in the
Yeah.
banner of the letters. I think that's really smart.
And that's the easiest place to do them because you don't have all the applique to run into and
Mhm.
travel.
And then it's all just floating there. I like that.
Awesome. I really like the diamonds.
I think it's fun. I don't know. I just like that.
I think it would be better to have it continue out to the border, like you said, Jodi, than to cut it off because it does give that another layer
Yeah.
look.
Right.
It almost makes me want to make a quilt like that so I can do that.
Started.
I'll send you one of the ones that come in to quilt. How about that? And you can play to your heart's desire.
We're actually not that far away from each other.
Okay.
Oh.
When we asked Sharon where she's at, I'm like, are you above Montana or are you on this side?
I'm just below. I can get to the border in 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
I can meet you in Eureka in 4 hours.
There you go. Well, it's going to take me longer than 4 hours to get to Eureka. Probably 7 hours to Eureka,
Wow.
but I can get there.
So this one is mine. And I also made frames, and like I made 2 main frames around the sew because that just looks like a banner across the quilt. But in all the cornerstone areas, I just did a little echoed heart just to break it up so it's not all linear. And then I would ditch all the appliques just because you went through so much effort of putting those appliques there. You want them all to pop up. I drew a swirly fill, but fills are personal. You can make it whatever you want. But in each block, I like to make each block different because it keeps up with my attention. And it's like each new block is like a new little quilt. So it makes me happy. But on the sewing machine one, I made it look like there's a table and then did wallpaper in the background. I just like to make each block more like personal, its own little area of the quilt. And then straight lines in the spools. I think that's a given at this point. But I did echo around the spools, just a tiny little area of rest for your eye. I continued whatever fill was in the sew area around that on the inside part. And then I just did curly feathers around the outside. And I do long arm feathers. So I just make a big swirl, come down one side, go up the other. And it makes it travel really fast. And then I thought the little buttons in the corner were spool caps. So I actually put like made with love on there. Just had fun with it. I too want to make this quilt. Yeah,
Again, I'll send you one.
it's great. I mean, if you have like ADD or get bored easily, these are the best kind of quilts because you can just change it up as you go. I really
Right.
like.
I love the little love in the heart.
Yeah, I do that. Like if there's a little house, I'll put welcome across the door. It's just
Right.
it's a fun little thing. It doesn't take that much more effort. Yeah.
And it doesn't take anything away, but it just adds another element.
Yeah, it does.
They're like those little things that you notice, you know, as you're looking at a quilt, then you're like, oh, look, you know, it kind of draws people into it
Right.
more.
Mhm.
Yep.
I had fun with that.
You would happily quilt that quilt.
I would because it holds my attention. If you give me a quilt that has 72 of the same block, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to lose it on row 3.
Yeah.
Okay, this one is my drawing, and some of the things are the same. I think we all kind of agree that the straight lines look great in the spools to look like thread. We talked a little bit about thread, but I personally would change color of thread in the spools from whatever you use in the background, just because I would want it to see it a little bit creamier in here to blend with some of the darker colors. I tend to rather see a lighter thread on a darker fabric versus the darker thread on a lighter fabric, and that's just how I prefer it. So that's the spools. And I did a wavy line in here across the seam instead of a straight line. And it turned out kind of looking like pie crust. but I just kind of thought it was kind of fun to do a little wavy line there, just a bit of a whimsical instead of being perfectly straight, because inside the quilt, I suggested to do a crosshatch. And it's just another way to deal with applique where maybe things are a little bit busy already and you want the applique to be the star and not compete with the quilting, but you do have some options within that crosshatch idea that you can play with. So up at the top, I did a diagonal crosshatch, and I'll mention that you can see that my crosshatch is covering over top of the applique, but I of course would quilt it so that it would not go over top of the applique. It would stop when I got to the sewing machine and then travel to my next point and continue on. Or just go ahead and ditch the whole applique and then come back to where I left off and continue with the crosshatch. The diamond crosshatch is a little bit more of an elegant feel, whereas the 45-degree crosshatch down here is a bit more of a whimsical feel. That's just my personal feeling on it. And this quilt feels definitely more whimsical and playful to me. So I did more of the background in the 45-degree, but it's just nice to have a visual just in case you're considering which one to do. And it would be easier to mark the 45 because you could literally mark from corner to corner and do each block individually, instead of with one like this, you're having weird angles to mark. So it's a little bit more fussy with your, placement of your ruler, making sure that everything's at the right angle as you go across. So I felt like the letters in So was, like Jodi said, a little bit more of a focal point, maybe a banner-ish. So I would quilt that differently. And so an idea would be to either quilt this with a really pretty, more dense background fill of either pebbles or swirls and feathers. And I've got a little, maybe just a bit more than 1/4 of an inch echo around the applique here, just to make it stand out a bit more, as well as ditching it right up next to the fabric. Or you could do this fill everywhere else and just do the crosshatch here. So you could switch the positions of those two quilting ideas, just something different to make those letters stand out different a little bit more from the rest. And I gave us a couple of suggestions here as to if you felt like the crosshatch grid was just too plain, there's all kinds of ways that you can dress them up by either stitching the grid and then stitching something inside it, or just marking the crosshatch grid and then just quilting those designs without the lines. So there's alternate squares, there's kind of half square triangles and a continuous curve. So you can experiment and decide something like that if you wanted to do something a little different. And I thought those were spool ends as well. So I put a swirl in there, but I think you're putting some buttons in there.
Yes, they're scheduled to have 4 black buttons,
Oh, right.
like a buttonhole.
It is one big button, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so just disregard my swirl. But I did put some spools out in the corner. Sometimes we struggle with, we do really well with designs along the length of a border, but then when we get to a corner, sometimes it's hard to know what to put there or how to get feathers to go around a corner. So if you're one, you may not, but if you are one that struggles with corners, then just putting something completely different there is kind of a nice way to break it up, and it just keeps that whimsical element all the way going through the border. And I love feathers too. So if you decide to put a feather in here, putting a feather on the border is a nice way to balance that. And I did straight lines here instead of the dip in. I just liked how it really blocked off and made kind of an architectural feel to this, almost like little columns. But I saw the other girls dip their feathers a little bit in, and the leaves a little bit into this space. And I really like that too. So you could dip some of the bigger feathers into those spaces and then continue the lines on either sides of those bigger feathers, just to make it look like those feathers are dipping into the space and that the lines are behind it. So just gives it a little bit more of a dimensional feel that there's layers of design there. So that is a wrap. That's it. Do you have any questions for any of us?
I do not. We talked about 60 weight thread and a couple battings. I love wool batting. I don't use it very often, but I do love it, and I like the look of the layered. But I wasn't positive to put it on the top or the bottom, so that's good to know.
Yeah, you put it on the
I
top.
sometimes use actually 2 layers of wool because it's still light, but you get a lot of that puff, but you get the puff on both sides. Whereas if you put the stabilizing batting underneath, whether it's the cotton or the blend, that puts all the wool puff on the top. But just
Right.
depends on what I have in the studio and can grab easily.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
I've even done that trick with the 80-20 on the bottom and the wool on the top with edge to edge quilts, depending on the pantograph that I choose. If it's a design where maybe there's some tighter areas and then some bigger areas like a feather or a floral element that I want to stand up a little bit more, it works really nicely on even on doing edge to edge sometimes.
I bet.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and speaking of edge to edge, if you have a lot of those, you know, that you possibly be quilting, you know, people have different budgets. So, you know, something like that, if you choose the right thread color, you can quilt that with an edge to edge, you know, and,
Right.
you know, because, yeah, not everybody can afford to get some of the detail, but we were, you know, giving you advice. It wasn't planned for the masses that you
Right,
possibly
exactly.
be quilting this for.
Yeah.
So,
And I knew that.
but an edge to edge can be done. The trick really is, you know, aside from the design, obviously, which should be nondescript, the right thread color, because you do have a variety of, you know, changes between the dark and the light, but it can be done and still look pretty.
Yep. I sadly am a little like Karen in that edge to edge pantos just bore me to tears. I would rather custom something for less money than do a panto.
Well,
I would just do a really wide custom. So,
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
well, regardless what you go with, what the choices for your quilt, we hope that you will share the finished project with us at some point whenever you make your decision. We gave you lots of options. Of course, they're just suggestions to try to, you know, for you to see what our thought process was for that quilt. But yeah, we'd love to see your finished quilt.
Well, and I already have it planned out in my head using parts from each of you, I think.
Oh, that's
But when it will get on the machine is, you know,
That's
We
okay.
know.
We'll be around. But
So-
yeah, we want to thank you again very much for joining us today and for sharing your incredible quilt with us and with everybody else watching. So happy
I
quilting.
appreciate it. Thank you, ladies. This has been very fun.
It was nice to meet you, Sue.
Nice to meet you as well.
Maybe we'll meet for a picnic one day.
There you go. Come down to Montana. I'll take you to a great place.
We'll maybe have to wait till our border opens, but we could meet up for the quilt show in Eureka one year.
We could.
Yeah.
That would be lovely. I've never been to that particular show.
Beautiful, all outdoors, gorgeous. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe we could put our quilt in.
You could.
There you go.
Good. That'd be exciting. You never know.
Yeah.
Eh, Thanks again, Sue, and
Thank
take
you.
care.
Okay.
You guys have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode today, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.